All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving into a question that I think we've all pondered at some point. Are we really as attractive as we think we are?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm definitely guilty of wondering that myself from time to time.
Yeah, we all are, right? So get this, there's this fascinating study, a survey actually, that tackled this very question head on. They dug into how people's self-ratings on attractiveness stacked up against how total strangers rated them.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm all ears. So how'd they set up this study? I'm curious.
Well, they asked people to submit 2 photos of themselves.
Okay.
One, kind of an average day look, how they normally present themselves. And then another photo, their best day look, like when they're really feeling their most attractive.
Oh, clever. I like that.
And then they had a bunch of other people rate those photos on a scale of, 1 to 10.
Makes sense.
But here's where it gets interesting. The participants, the people in the photos, they also rated their own attractiveness on that same scale.
Ah, I see where this is going. So they compared how people saw themselves to how others actually saw them. Really gets at those self-perception biases we all have.
Exactly.
Get ready for some awkward laughs and maybe some introspection about those selfies we all post.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
This study,
Yeah.
it goes beyond just asking people to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
Participants actually submitted 2 photos, an average one and their best shot.
Gotcha.
And then they had those photos rated by other people who didn't know them.
Oh, wow. So, really putting themselves out there.
Yeah, putting your ego on the line, not just picking a number.
For sure.
We've got the deep dive pack with a survey that explores how these self-ratings line up with ratings from total strangers
Okay.
using both photo types.
Makes sense.
And the researchers use 3 different ways for people to assess themselves. A simple rating, comparing themselves to other photos, and even gauging if they'd consider someone out of their league.
Wow. That's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, they really tried to cover all the bases.
Right.
But before we jump into the really juicy results,
Okay.
it's important to remember that this was a pretty small sample size.
Okay.
92 women and 142 men.
Okay.
And not randomly selected.
Gotcha.
They were mainly recruited from Twitter, so likely skewed towards a certain demographic.
Right. So we're probably talking about a lot of white, educated liberals.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
So while the findings are super intriguing, they might not apply to everyone.
Makes sense.
It's more about spotting the patterns and thinking, do I do that too?
Yeah, for sure.
So with all those caveats in mind,
Okay.
did people's self-ratings actually match up with what strangers thought?
Well, the short answer is not really.
Oh.
There was a very weak correlation, meaning that how you see your own attractiveness doesn't accurately predict how attractive other people find you.
Ouch. That's got to sting for some people.
It might.
But let's break it down.
Okay.
This study found that both men and women overestimated their attractiveness, but in different ways.
Interesting.
What stood out to you there?
Well, if we look at the average self-ratings, both men and women hovered around 6.3 for their average photos and 7.3 for their best.
Okay.
So people tend to think they're a little bit above average.
Yeah.
Especially when they're putting their best foot forward.
Yeah, it's the classic above average effect, right?
Exactly.
Makes you wonder what everyone else considers average if we all think we're better than it.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The average ratings given by others were lower.
Oh,
Women received an average of 5.0 for average photos and 5.3 for their best, while men got 4.4 and 4.6.
wow. So not only is there a gap between how we see ourselves and how others see us, but the size of that gap differs between men and women.
Right. And men, on average, overestimated their attractiveness by a larger margin.
Right.
I feel like I know what our listeners are going to ask next.
Oh, let's hear it.
Does this mean that men are more delusional about their looks?
Not necessarily. What's fascinating is that within those overestimations, there were nuances.
Okay.
So the data suggests that less attractive men, based on those stranger readings, were actually more self-aware than you might expect.
Interesting.
But on the other hand, women's self-ratings were pretty consistent across both phototypes, no matter how they were ultimately perceived.
So maybe some men have a more inflated sense of their best selves,
Yeah, could be.
while women are a bit more grounded, at least in this study.
Yeah, that's a really interesting takeaway.
Yeah, I'm already rethinking my last selfie.
Me too, me too. Yeah, it really does make you think, huh?
Totally. And speaking of those best photos,
Yeah?
there's another layer to this gender dynamic that we haven't even touched on. The study actually found that men rated women slightly higher overall.
Interesting.
Hold on. So even with all this talk about overestimation, men still tend to rate women more favorably than women rate men. Whoa. I feel like we could unpack that for a whole other deep dive.
For sure, for sure.
Okay.
But for now, what's key is that despite this difference,
Yeah.
both men and women inflated their self-assessments.
Okay.
So it seems everyone, regardless of gender, tends to view themselves through those rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
At least when it comes to attractiveness.
It's like we all think we're a little bit hotter than we actually are.
Maybe so.
Okay, so we've established that there's a disconnect between how we see ourselves and how other people see us,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to looks. But why does this gap exist in the first place?
Right.
What are some of the possible explanations?
Well, the study digs into several, and it's worth thinking about which ones resonate most with you.
Okay.
One factor could be those societal expectations we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Think about the confidence gap versus modesty norms for men and women.
Yeah.
Men are often encouraged to be assertive, even bordering on cocky,
Right.
while women are often socialized to be more humble, even self-deprecating.
So it's not that men are inherently more confident,
Right.
but they might be more conditioned to express it more openly, especially about their appearance.
Exactly.
And women, even if they feel really good about how they look, might downplay it.
Yeah.
Because of those unspoken rules.
Yeah, it's not just individual perception. It's those cultural messages we internalize about beauty and how we're supposed to act.
It's crazy how deeply ingrained these gender norms can be.
I know, it's fascinating.
Even when we're talking about something as personal as how attractive we think we are.
Right.
But the study also points to some cognitive biases that might be at play here.
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, tell me about those.
Well, one key bias is the self-enhancement bias,
Okay.
which basically means we have this tendency to see ourselves more positively
Okay.
than we might actually be.
Yeah.
It's a self-protective mechanism, helps us maintain a positive self-image.
So we all have those rose-colored glasses on,
They might.
filtering out the less flattering bits. I guess that's probably healthier than constantly putting ourselves down.
Right.
But it can definitely skew our self-perception.
Yeah, it's natural to want to see ourselves in a good light. But when it comes to attractiveness, this bias can lead to overestimating our appeal.
That makes sense. Are there any other cognitive biases that we should be aware of?
Yeah, there's another interesting one called norm-based mental scaling.
Norm-based mental scaling. Okay, I've never heard of that one.
This is the idea that people subconsciously stretch that 1 to 10 attractiveness scale
Okay.
based on their own limited experiences and feedback.
Oh, interesting.
For example, imagine you hang out with friends who constantly compliment your style.
Yeah.
This might lead you to believe that you're like a fashion icon, even if other people don't share that view.
Oh, so our individual norms,
Right.
shaped by the people we surround ourselves with,
Exactly.
and the feedback that we get,
Exactly.
influences how we interpret that scale,
Yeah.
not some universal standard of attractiveness.
Precisely. And those individual norms can lead to those discrepancies we've been talking about
Yeah.
between how we rate ourselves
Yeah.
and how other people see us.
Fascinating. It's not just about like individual biases,
Yeah.
but also like the social bubbles that we're in and
Yeah.
the feedback loops within them.
Exactly.
But the study also dives into something I think we can all relate to.
Okay.
The role of photo selection and how we present ourselves, especially online.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Like, think about the pressure of choosing that perfect picture for your profile.
Oh, my gosh, all the time.
Or that post-worthy selfie.
Right?
We're all trying to capture our best angles and put our best foot forward.
Of course.
But is it really as simple as just picking a photo where we think we look our best?
Hmm.
The study found some interesting results about those best photos.
Oh, really?
What did they find?
Well, for starters, there was a surprisingly small gap
Okay.
between the average ratings for average and best photos. Only 0.25 points on average.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that all that effort that we put into looking our absolute best
Yeah.
might not actually make as much of a difference as we think it does.
That could very well be.
Interesting.
Here's where things get even more intriguing. About a third of participants actually received lower ratings for their best photos.
Oh, so trying to look extra hot can actually backfire.
It seems that way, yeah.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it speaks to the idea that authenticity might be more appealing than a meticulously curated image. Perhaps those overly styled selfies or unnatural poses come across as less genuine.
It makes you wonder if, in trying to project a certain image of hotness,
Right.
we might actually be masking the very qualities that make us attractive in the first place.
Exactly. And remember, there's often this disconnect
Right.
between how we look in a carefully staged photo and how we look in real life.
Yeah.
A photo captures a fleeting moment, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the full picture.
This is making me think about those Instagram versus reality posts that highlight the difference between our online personas
Oh, yeah.
and our real-life selves.
Totally.
Maybe the same concept applies to attractiveness.
Yeah.
We might be presenting a version of ourselves in photos
Right.
that isn't totally aligned with how we actually look and interact with the world.
That's a great connection. And it underscores the limitations of using photos as like the sole measure of attractiveness.
Right.
There's so much more to it
For sure.
than what can be captured in a single image.
Totally. Things like personality and energy and how we carry ourselves.
Yeah, all that stuff.
All contribute to our overall attractiveness. And those qualities don't always translate through a photo.
Right. And before we move on,
Yeah.
it's important to acknowledge that this study, while fascinating,
Yeah.
wasn't without its limitations.
Of course.
The sample size was relatively small, and the participants weren't randomly selected.
Right. We always want to be mindful of that. But even with those limitations,
Yeah.
this study raises some really thought-provoking questions about how we see ourselves and others, especially when it comes to something as subjective and multifaceted as attractiveness.
It really is.
So where do we go from here? Are we all doomed to just be delusional about our attractiveness? Or is there a way to bridge the gap between self-perception and reality?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
And I think this study offers some clues.
Yeah.
It highlights how our self-perception of attractiveness can be a bit skewed, you know?
For sure.
But it also suggests there's a lot more to the picture than just physical appearance.
Right. Like maybe instead of getting hung up on being delusional,
Yeah.
it's more about remembering that beauty is subjective and our own perceptions are just one piece of the puzzle.
Totally. So maybe instead of focusing so much on like hitting some arbitrary standard of hotness,
Right.
we should think about cultivating qualities like confidence, kindness, authenticity, you know?
Yeah,
Things that are universally appealing and can't be faked in a selfie.
absolutely. It's like they say beauty's only skin deep, but ugly goes clear to the bone.
Ooh, I like that.
True attractiveness comes from within.
Yeah, it's so much more than just how you look in a photo.
And I think this study, even with its limitations, reminds us that self-awareness is key.
Yeah.
If we can kind of understand the factors that influence how we see ourselves,
Right.
like societal norms and those cognitive biases we talked about,
Yeah.
even how we choose to present ourselves online, then we can have a more balanced view of our own attractiveness.
So maybe the most attractive quality is being self-aware and willing to embrace who we are, flaws and all.
It's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah. And maybe if we can let go of comparing ourselves to others and chasing some like impossible ideal of perfection,
Right.
we can start to appreciate the unique beauty that each of us has.
Absolutely.
So after all this, does it make you rethink those best selfies, or maybe does it reinforce the idea that true attractiveness goes beyond any number?
It definitely makes me want to be more mindful about the photos I share and the messages that they might be sending. And it reminds me that true attractiveness isn't about chasing likes or validation. It's about feeling good in your own skin.
And for you listening, I hope this deep dive has got you thinking about how societal expectations our own biases, and even just how we present ourselves all play a role in how we perceive attractiveness, both in ourselves and in others.
Absolutely. And it may be the most important question to consider is, what truly makes someone attractive?
Yeah.
Is it a perfectly filtered Instagram feed, or is it that genuine smile that lights up a room? I think we'd all know the answer,
Yeah.
even if it gets lost sometimes in our image-obsessed world.
So maybe the real key to being our most attractive selves isn't about filters or angles or trying to fit into some mold. Maybe it's about letting go of all those external pressures and just embracing what makes us unique.
I love that.
Because at the end of the day, authenticity never goes out of style.
Well said. And on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of challenging our assumptions about attractiveness.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep embracing the beauty that lies within.